This is the Marketing Umbrella Podcast, where it's all about getting the information you need from successful leading marketers to build and grow your digital marketing agency. Brought to you by Itamar Shafir, founder and CEO of Umbrella, the technology platform and brand that is powering thousands of marketing agencies around the country. Find him at umbrellaus.com. Now, here's your host, Kevin Prewett.
This is the Marketing Umbrella Podcast. I want to thank you for joining us today. And our guest is a third-generation entrepreneur who left her 15-year corporate leadership career to build her own startups and help other founders on their journey. As the founder of Jumpstart Studio, she brings a unique combination of corporate expertise and startup experience to help early-stage entrepreneurs turn their ideas into commercial successes. As a lecturer at the University of Melbourne, teaching the Masters of Entrepreneurship course and author of Start Right, How to Pick a Winning Business Idea and Make It Successful, which is a guide to help first-time founders build the right mindset, design a good strategy, and execute on their ideas. Born and raised in India, she started her career in Africa and is now based in Melbourne, Australia. An avid traveler who's visited and worked in 41 countries and speaks 4 languages, I want to welcome a chronic underachiever to the podcast today, Sangeeta Mulchandani. Thanks for joining us. I'm blown away at this and I've left so much out. I mean, there was so much more that we could have unpacked here, but man, thanks for joining us on the podcast today. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Kevin.
So speaking of bio, like I mentioned, there were many things that we didn't touch on. So what are some things that I didn't kind of bring to the forefront that you think would just kind of round out to paint a really solid picture?
So I run 4 businesses at the moment as well. So Jumpstart Studio is one of them, like you mentioned, where I work with early stage entrepreneurs and help them transition from idea to reality. The other business is a digital marketing business that started during the pandemic. And I'm not a marketer by any way, shape, or form, but this just happened where people were asking me, hey, how do I now go from a bricks and mortar business to an online business? Right. And so I established a team or a business back in India where I could outsource work for digital marketing. And so during the pandemic, I was helping businesses transition into online businesses using digital marketing services. The third business is called Australian Professionals of Colour, which is a community organization, a not-for-profit organization where we work with professionals of colour in Australia to help them climb the corporate ladder, but also work with organizations and corporates to bring in cultural intelligence. Right. So the concept of cultural intelligence in action in their day-to-day sort of leadership roles for people. And the fourth one is I'm co-producing a documentary series, which is about founders of color and how to sort of highlight their stories in the Australian landscape a little bit more.
So I obviously was talking about a chronic underachiever. My explanation was chronically underachieving as I was trying to lay that. So that is absolutely incredible that you could balance all that and obviously do all of them well, because I mean, the parable about the spinning plates, if you don't keep them spinning, they tend to fall. But if you just had to pick one of those, what is the one what's kind of the jewel of the crown there? What's the one that you just think that's what gets me out of bed in the morning?
It's such a tough question. Like I get asked this all the time. It's like, how do you balance this, or how do you manage all the 4 businesses? I don't see them as different though. For me, I'm helping 2 groups of people, and one is people who are professionals of color, and one group is entrepreneurs. And as long as every day I've made progress towards helping these 2 groups of people and made a difference in their lives, that really makes me very happy. Because like you said, I spent 15 years in the corporates where it was all about me, and me. Yeah. It was all about my success and my growth. In around 2016, 2017, that sort of flipped for me a little bit. Mm-hmm. And it started becoming about, well, I can keep doing this, but it's not making me happy anymore. Right. And so this is why I got into entrepreneurship, is so I could help other people. So in about 2016, 17, I said, right, I'm going to spend the next few years just doing what I love doing every single day, the corporate high-flying job was great, but it just wasn't making me happy. So I just wanted to do something that made me happy. And I found happiness in being able to serve others or help others move ahead in their lives. And it's very funny because the more they succeed, the more I succeed.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's very interesting to see that, how their success, the more I help them succeed, the more my success increases as well. So that's been quite fascinating to watch.
So, nothing's wasted, in our historic economy. So that, you look back and you think that time in corporate it not only taught you what you didn't want to do, moving forward, but it probably laid a pretty solid, laid some groundwork for what you would move into, whether it was your network that you built, whether it was just skills you acquired, that type of thing. But I do find that transition interesting because we'll talk to so many people and that it's almost like it's a second life, transition. You move from success to significance or whatever, but so often it is counter to our culture. Not only the culture you're raised in, but the culture you exist in today, that says, I'm gonna take a step back here. And so talk about that a little bit, because I think that would be an interesting perspective, for our listeners to hear about, how you kind of balance that.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because, I do help people exactly in that space where, we all come to a point in life, I suppose, where you're like, but this is not what I want to do anymore. And because sort of very early on, we are sort of forced to choose a lifestyle, a career that other people want us to choose. It's sort of informed by external pressures, not necessarily just internal motivations.
Right.
And more so because if you look at it, if you strip it all back, like ever since you're born, you're sort of conditioned in a certain way to think about things in a certain way, the way your family perceives the world, the way they've been brought up. So, a lot of their own experiences are thrust upon you in a way and it forms your own sort of thinking as well. And then you go through the whole system of schooling and university and, all of those things.
Highly competitive. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're all preconditioning, right? So they all, in a way, they institutionalize you.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Ever since you're born, right? And so you go into this whole institutional piece of finishing your schooling, finishing your college, your university, and you come out on the other side, and then you're like, the reason you did all this was to get a job, and then you go in and get a job. And then again, at the job, you're conditioned and institutionalized in a certain way. So very often we don't sort of, to your point, step back and reflect on, is this what I really want to do? But you do get to a point in life where, because it's not so aligned with who you really are or where you want to go, there's friction. You start seeing friction in your daily life. It could be as simple as, I just don't feel like getting out of bed and going to work. Or it could be as simple as, this is, just being irritated and angry all the time, or just not being able to focus on things properly enough, or just always having this second thought at the back of your mind, oh my God, what if I take this risk and, do something different, do something else? And so every time sort of, being aware of that friction, I think really is the point where you've got to stop and you've got to do something about it, because if you don't, you're just going to end up living an unhappy life for the rest of your life.
I love that whole picture of painting that friction, and it really is an internal friction, but it's also external as well. But expectations of others and perspective and culture. But one thing I did mention in the bio that I didn't want to fly by, the whole idea that you kind of not only traveled to 41 countries, you have a kind of a unique way to travel to these countries, from what I remember, maybe in another podcast that you had kind of answered that question. So let's talk about that just really briefly.
Yeah. So like I said, in 2016, 17, so I traveled a little bit, through my life. But around 2016, 17 is where, like I said, there was this friction happening with my own self and my own work. And so I decided to do this program called the Remote Year. And Remote Year is about living and working in different countries for a period of 1 year with strangers, with, other professionals.
Right.
And so I went off on this journey early 2017. And as I traveled and lived and worked across Europe and Africa and South America and a bit of North America as well, I just found that, I loved travel. I just loved what I was doing. But one of the things that I loved the most about travel, or my highlight in every sort of country that I was visiting, or living in as well, was just being able to meet the locals. And for me, there are two things that I love: travel and food. So to me, it was about how do I learn a little bit more about the culture and the language, because to me, it's not about just going and visiting the place and
being a tourist.
Being a tourist and sightseeing and just taking pictures. To me, it's about, when you go to a place, it's about understanding the people, the language, the culture, how they live. And I was like, how do I do that? So I would find local events that are happening in every city that I was in, and I would go to these local events, meet the local people there, and then find a way to sort of bring them back to my accommodation where I was living. And usually they were apartments and, places that I was living in. So I would call them back home, and I would actually make them Indian food. So I would actually look for an Indian grocery store in every city that I would go to, even places like Croatia or, Serbia, and, really far-flung places where Indian food is not mainstream.
Right.
And so I would still try and find my spices and try and find, all the different sort of ingredients for a nice meal. And I'll put together an Indian meal. I'll invite people over. And it was so much fun because they would come over and they would get to learn a little bit about me, about my culture, and we'd have really interesting conversations. And then, they would in turn invite me back to their homes, and, I would get to see their lives. I would get to see their families and, how they lived and, things like that. So that was one of the most enriching experiences ever, to be able to make friends in so many different countries, but not just meeting them for drinks or dinner, but actually connecting.
I mean, it's a unique way to connect. Like you said, it's not just digital tourism. It's not just, or just a remote, kind of drive-by, I mean, it's the whole idea of engaging in the culture. But I love the idea of it's really not work-life balance. It really is almost like work-life integration. You've got so many, things that are happening around you, but did one of those kind of lead to the other, kind of led to the other, kind of led to the other? I mean, did you create the digital marketing agency out of a need that you had, in somewhere else? Because that so often, I think entrepreneurs do that, it's virtually the proverbial scratching your own itch, so to speak. Yeah. So what was that? Or did you just recognize a gap in the market and take advantage of it?
Yeah, it's very interesting because, so when I started my entrepreneurship journey, which was in 2019, so in 2017, I was doing all these travels because I was unhappy with my work. And I thought, well, maybe it is, living in Australia, living in Melbourne is what's making me unhappy. So I went out and did these travels. I was super happy. But then, my corporate job pulled me back, and they offered me better pay, better promotions, everything better. And then they were like, come back.
Golden handcuffs.
Yeah, that's it, golden handcuffs. And I came back, and then again, within a few months, I was not feeling happy again. And I was again, I was like, okay, maybe it's not Melbourne, maybe it's work. Maybe I need to change what I do. And this is where in 2019, I decided to take a year off work. And so in Australia, we get something called the career break, which is you can take 18 months off work to study and do things that you want to do. And then you can go back to the same company. And so I took 12 months off, and I went and did my second master's degree in entrepreneurship. And the reason I did that was because I was playing it safe. I was saying, well, I'm going to try and build businesses through this degree. But if that doesn't happen, at least I have a master's degree.
Right. I can kind of hedge my bet a little bit.
That's it. The typical non-entrepreneurial thing to do. But that's the mindset piece of shifting from an employee to an entrepreneur. And so when I did that in 2019, I built a travel business, which failed. And then I built a food business, which was based off my travel idea of where I was meeting people. And so it was about having dinner parties in strangers' homes in your own cities rather than in different cities. And that did really well, but then COVID hit.
I was going to say COVID would have endangered both of those ideas for sure.
Yeah. And so I had to shelf that business. And then I went back and my 12 months came up. And so I went back to the corporate. And when I went back to the corporate, I was just within a week, I was like, no, this is not working for me anymore. I've outgrown the whole corporate thing.
Yep.
And I just, want to keep doing building businesses. So in the middle of the pandemic, literally, I'm in this space where I'm thinking, okay, I'm leaving my corporate job. What do I do? And I found I was mentoring somebody pro bono during that time for his own business. And he's a lawyer. He's been in business for 7 years. And he was at this point in time where he was trying to, change his business a little bit.
Right.
And I was just mentoring him pro bono. And then after a few sessions with him, he was like, I want to pay you for this. And I said, no, you don't need to pay me. It's okay. I've got this corporate job. That's takes care of my payments. I just love the whole business scene. So, I'm happy to work with you. And so he said, no, if you don't take payment from me, I'm not working with you anymore. And so literally that's how my digital marketing business started, because his whole piece was around how do I, position myself better online? How do I use social media better? How do I use marketing better?
Right.
And that's what I was consulting him on. And that was really interesting because that's how this digital marketing business started, because somebody wanted to pay me for it. And so
that is not normal, by the way. Just thought we'd clarify.
Yeah, I know. Right. I know. And so but then as I was working with him, then I found a couple more people that I started consulting with. And what I found is like a lot of them didn't want to, were very happy with the consulting, but then they didn't go back and implement things that we spoke about. And so the consulting was often okay. Yeah. And so they needed a done for you service. They were not able to do it themselves. And this is where I got connected with somebody in India. And it was all very happenstance. Like, it just happened along the way. And I got connected with somebody in India, and they were a digital marketing agency, and they were like, can you help us break into Australia? And I'm like, well, I can't help you break into Australia, but maybe we can work together to, see clients in Australia. And so this is how literally the digital marketing business started. So I do the consulting, they do the back end work, they do all the SEO, the website design, the, social media marketing and all of that. And we work together to sort of serve the customers here in Australia. So that's
the best way to do it. I mean, why not? I mean, if you have a need, go out there and see who's doing it well, and see if you can kind of combine to some sort of a joint venture, type thing. And it worked out well, obviously. So I want to talk a little bit about Jumpstart. So what is you said I jumped into the entrepreneurial space in 2019, and all of a sudden you're consulting, you've got a digital marketing agency, you're leading an association. So, this is quantum, leaps here in a pretty short period of time within a 4-year span, 2 years of COVID. So, let's talk about the birth and launch of Jumpstart and what it is exactly, and who's the ideal client.
Yeah. So, and very interesting question, because the ideal client has shifted over the years as well. But initially when I started, so in 2020, when I was doing this digital marketing business, I also started doing a lot of pro bono work around, because I had corporate experience, building large businesses, leading large teams across multiple countries. And then I had this business of experience of the startup world through my master's degree, and sort of, just starting out on my own and trying a few different things. So I was a few steps ahead of people who were just at idea stage. And so I'm a big believer in giving back. And so for me, it was like, okay, how do I, help people who are just maybe a couple of steps behind me? And so I did a lot of pro bono coaching and mentoring work during 2020. Where universities and a lot of sort of accelerator programs, incubator programs here in Australia, I would just do coaching and mentoring for their teams. So they'd have cohorts of people come in who wanted to build businesses, who were very idea stage, and I could help them sort of frame up their ideas, pitch them in the right way, go do market testing, go do, experimentation around their ideas in the market, understand if there is a market for their ideas and how to position themselves in the market. And so a lot of my skills from the different areas were coming into play here to help people build businesses, which was great. I was really enjoying it. But as I was doing that, a lot of people I would see would come to me from the corporates as well and say, "Hey, Sangeeta, really love what you're doing." And by mid 2020, I'd left my corporate job, so I resigned and I left my corporate gig.
Right.
But I still had networks there, and people would often come to me and say, "How did you do it? How did you transition out of being an employee into an entrepreneur?" And I was still like, a really young entrepreneur back then in 2020, and it was really interesting that, I was getting so many questions, and I thought, well, maybe there's something here to be able to help people make that transition. And as I was also working with these other people in these universities, they would have very similar questions for me as well. So they were all in that same space
Right.
where they were all trying to start something new or had an idea, but just didn't know how to go about it. So that's how my book came about, Start Right. So it's about that, but also Jumpstart Studio was born with that idea where it's a platform where or a space where people can come in and we help them first test and validate their ideas in the market. And then once we know that there's legs, there's possibilities here, I then have partnerships with a number of other providers like accountants, legal, marketing, all of that sort of everything that a business needs to be able to get off the ground. And so once we test the ideas, testing of the ideas will happen within Jumpstart, and then we'll connect you with the right partners. That was
like an incubator, so
like
to speak.
incubator.
I mean, it's like almost like an idea incubator. It's like, let's test it. Let's kind of do the minimum viable product type thing.
That's right.
I really like the idea of, you've seen so many consultants out there that have been out of the game for 10, 15, 20 years, or professors even that are at universities. They're teaching, and it's almost like I got caught like in a time warp in 2008, or something like that. And it's like the idea that you were literally just a few steps ahead of those that you were consulting or helping, I think you were a very fresh practitioner.
Yes.
Hard lessons learned. I've got a couple of ideas that failed, got a couple of ideas that succeeded, I mean, it's real life, real time, that you got to share with them.
Yeah. And that's my value proposition, right? So my value proposition is I'm not like, I'm not scaling a business. I'm just a few steps ahead of you, but because I'm a few steps ahead of you, I can tell you what's current and what works, what doesn't work now. And so I think that's my key value proposition. And then after that, I've got the value proposition of having the right partners that can help them through that journey as well. And so that's how Jumpstart Studio was born. And as I started speaking with, startups, the funny thing is startups don't have money.
I was going to say that. Startups aren't chasing you to write you a check.
So. That's right. And so very soon, that came to light as I started with Jumpstart Studio. And it was interesting. And then I was finding ways of how I could help them in a more subsidized way. And also because at that point, like they're very idea stage, there's no equity opportunity as well, Taking equity is not a great unless the idea has been validated.
You're not an angel investor.
That's right. Yeah. And I mean, I could be, but then I need to know that the founder is a 10x founder. I need to know a few different things. And today I know that, right? So today the equity piece is a lot more easier to do because the way I work has changed. So going from being a one-on-one coach with startups, which I did a few startup coaching, sort of one-on-one coachings. And then the demand started coming in a lot from the government and these universities for paid coaching or paid, and then it morphed into paid program design. So they wanted me to come in and be able to design programs rather than just do the coaching, because I had experience from the past in my previous sort of corporate roles to be able to manage large teams and manage programs. And so I went in and I started doing program designs, which started about mid last year, where I've been designing programs for the government agencies here that run startup programs, or even sort of other universities and things like that. And so Jumpstart Studio now has morphed more into this space where I'm not just doing the one-on-one coachings, so that still happens, but also I work one-to-many, which is the B2B side of things, of working with organizations and helping coach, mentor, and design programs for them.
learn to scale yourself, so to
Yeah.
speak, a bit.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of, I mean, I'm blown away at how quickly things morph in your life.
Yeah.
How quickly you pivot and adjust and grow and scale. But talk a little bit about, I mean, our audience is primarily, marketing agency owners and those who work in that space. And
Mhm.
talk a little bit about what you found and what you've learned in just the short time that you've actually been in that space. And, what are some lessons that, hard lessons learned that you look back and think, this is what I thought going in, but this is actually the reality of life here.
Do you mean more from the marketing space?
Yeah, like
Just
you
general
said, you have your
entrepreneurship.
marketing agency, that just lessons
Yeah.
learned in running that, being a joint partner in that and trying to,
Yeah.
bring it to Australia. What are some things that you've kind of seen in the short period of time?
Yeah. I think marketing is very underrated, to be honest. I think entrepreneurs underestimate the power of marketing.
For sure.
Um, and so the people that I speak with often, a lot of my work with them, and this I'm starting to see a lot more of now as well, is with entrepreneurs generally, is around mindset. And it's about getting over that mindset of, oh my God, I've got to pay a few $1,000s before I could get any results from marketing. Like, I want results today.
Yeah.
And I think that's a myth in the industry where everyone's like, oh my God, marketing needs to, ROI on marketing needs to be immediate. But I think people have to look at marketing as a long game. So if you're in business, you're not in business just for one day. You're in business for the long game and for the long haul. And so the marketing strategies you put together need to be things that serve you, not just today, but serve you for the long haul. And so things like SEO, for example, search engine optimization, it takes 6 months sometimes before you can actually start seeing results, right?
Yep.
And people are like, so I have to still pay for it, even though it takes me 6 months. Right? And I have to pay for it every month before I can see any money back. And it's expensive. And I'm like, yeah, but it's about investing in your business and investing in your visibility, in being seen. And I think even with a lot of the work that I do is about sort of the mindset piece, like I said, is helping entrepreneurs see how it fits into the overall strategy of their business, like how marketing really fits in, how digital marketing fits in, because a lot of times, and especially people who are not very tech savvy or are not on social media that much, they don't really understand the power of it. And so,
or the time it takes.
All the time it takes.
Yeah, for sure.
And the quality piece as well, right? Because people think like, oh, we've got tools at our disposal now. There's AI, there's Canva, there's, tools like that I can just churn out my own stuff. And absolutely, like for early stage founders, people who are idea stage entrepreneurs, absolutely, that's 100% the way you should be going, because at that stage, you're just testing ideas. But when you're in business and when you want to be attracting customers, attracting the right customers, targeting the right customers, you've got to have a strategy in place, and you've got to bring in the experts. You've got to sort of stop relying on just, this is what I know about social media and I'm going to go do it. That's great for starters, but to have real impact, I think people who've spent a lot of time and energy in learning these systems and learning how to, really extract value out of these systems, you need those people on board. And so, there's no point in me saying, hey, I'm going to do SEO for you, because I don't know SEO. I haven't done it before. Yes, I can dabble around with it, but you've got to find people like my team that sits in India who knows how to do it. They've been doing it day in and day out for people, and they understand the tweaks. They understand what works. And these systems are not easy to navigate if you want the results.
And marketing agency owners would absolutely testify to that being the truth. It kind of reminds me of the E-Myth, book that talks about, working on your business instead of in it. Let the experts do their expert work. The whole idea that you were talking about. But I one thing that I kind of thought about as you were talking is that, as companies scale, it's not just that the quality of their work or whatever their product needs to scale as well, but the quality of the services that they require has
100%.
to scale. I mean, it is like this full 360 comprehensive, view that you look at. You can't get by with Chat GPT and just winging it. If you're scaling to 10 million, that will come back and bite you. But I'm curious, just as we transition to kind of our rapid fire, part of the
There's rapid
interview.
fire.
Yeah, we're about to go rapid fire here, but I do have one quick question, just a real short answer here, but just give us a very condensed version of the best client story that you've had so far in kind of the jumpstart space. That you don't have to go into great detail, but just really quickly, what's been kind of the if you just had to pick one as a success story, you say this one really made an impact here. And it's not, you want to be fair to all of them, but
Yeah, I know. And also
out?
There's just so many, because I also work with a lot of impact entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And the impact they're creating is phenomenal. Maybe I'll tell you one about a recent one. He's quite young in the entrepreneurial journey, but I started coaching him. His name is Mohammed, and he's establishing a company called Sci Africa, where he's looking at bringing local language education for science and technology students in Africa. So in Africa, a lot of the official language in many countries is English, and so education is done in English. But a lot of the local languages is what people speak in everyday, day in, day out, and that's what they're used to.
Their heart language, yeah.
That's right, their heart language. And so being able to sort of, so what he's doing is literally creating a platform where he can take science subjects for high school students and convert that into local language. Wow. So just take the curriculum as it is, get instructors to actually record videos in the local language, and then provide that back to students just to enhance their understanding. Because sometimes it's hard to understand concepts in a language that is not native to you.
Yeah.
So native language education is science education is what he's getting into, with the objective to create more science and STEM related sort of outputs from schools and universities in terms of people who can work in these industries and work more effectively in these industries, because they've learned the subject in a language that really matters to them and that works for them.
And able to teach others.
Able to teach others, exactly.
For sure. And it doesn't have to be in an urban setting as much as, that we could be out in a more rural setting. But I love that idea. I think he's going to run into the same issues that you run into with early stage startups, is, how do you fund that, but
100%. But what I love about it is, it was like 3 months ago, this idea was just an idea. And today he's got his first funding of $20,000 from a fund board. So we worked together for about 3 months through a program at a university here. He's just come out of the program and won the prize money at the end, which is a $20,000 equity free funding. And I know for a fact that he's just and working with him for those 3 months, to me, he's a 10x founder. Every time I would say go do this, he would do that 10 times over, and he would just come back with phenomenal results week on week. And that too, sitting in Melbourne, Australia, thousands of miles away from Africa, where it is on the ground. So I think founders like that are rare to come by, and I love working with founders like that.
I think it recognizes each other. I think you recognize it in yourself and in him as well.
Maybe.
So we are jumping in the rapid fire. Real quick, short answers here. Just don't even think about them. Just respond. Okay. Did you get along with your parents growing up?
Yes.
Do you have siblings?
Yes.
Do you have a pet?
I had a few, but I'm scared of pets.
Any children?
No.
What time do you wake up every day, approximately?
I'm not a morning person. But I wake up I wake up half an hour before my first meeting is due any morning.
I love that answer. That's the best answer we've ever had on that. So, and then the inverse of that. So what time do you go to bed in the evening? Whenever I'm tired.
It's sort of whenever I'm tired, but it's usually later in the day. So probably around 12 or 1-ish.
So ideal vacation spot. I mean, you travel all over the world. So where is ideal best place you've ever been?
Oh, best place I've ever been. One that I would like to go back to. Like, I can't pick the best one. They're all great, and I still have a lot more to do. Like, my goal is to do all the countries in the world before I die.
Yeah.
But the one that I definitely want to go back to, so hard to pick one. Iceland. Iceland has always been one that I want to go back to. And so I went in December, which I saw 4 hours of daylight. And so I want to go back in the summer where I see 24 hours of daylight.
Yeah. That anything north of there would provide that same opportunity. So one last question. If you could change anything in the marketing space today, if you were king, queen for a day, what is one thing, really short answer, what's one thing that you would change in the marketing space today?
What I would change in the marketing space today? What question? There's so many things.
I'm having a hard time narrowing it down.
Yeah. And so if I was to change something, it would probably be, I think I would change how people see marketing in terms of, as an expense. I would want them to see it as an investment. Yep. So if there's anything I can change in people's mindsets, that would be one thing.
And I think everyone that's listening to this podcast would just stand up and cheer and agree with you wholeheartedly in that answer. And they would say, we're going to elect her queen for the day because if she can pull that off, we're all better off. But I just want to thank you again just for sharing your story, just coming on the podcast today. It's been a real pleasure to chat with you. And, sometimes you just forget that you're recording and I'm just having a conversation here, just asking good questions and answering them. But it's just really good to hear your heart behind, this, you just don't get up and just, out of just sheer avarice, I'm just going to try to just build, on top of buildings. But what is just one thing that you'd close us with today that I haven't asked you about, that just really quick, what do you think is one thing that just a good way to wrap us up today? And maybe just remind me of the book again, remind our audience of the book that you wrote again and where that's available.
Yeah. So my book is undergoing a revamp now, again, all around marketing, right? So this is my book. It's called Start Right: How to Pick a Winning Business Idea and Make It Successful. It talks about 3 key things, which is mindset, strategy, and execution. And it's positioned for people who have great ideas, but just don't know where to get started, or have started off and are overwhelmed in the journey in the early stages of building a business. So that's exactly for who I've written for here. This book, it's been a year since I've published this book. And again, what I found is the marketing piece is super important when you publish a book. Right. So writing a book is one thing, but then the publishing is another thing. And then, oh my God, the marketing is what is going to make a difference, is what's going to sell the book, is going to get in front of people's eyes and all of that. And in my own journey of learning about marketing as well, I'm revamping the book now. So it will shortly be available on Amazon again. It was on Amazon, but it will be available again. And I will share the link with you. But we're revamping the cover of the book, the way it looks, the way it stands out, and also the way it is marketed on Amazon. So I'm going through my own digital marketing journey there. But once it will have a different cover. So it won't look like this when you're buying it. But I will send you the link when it's ready.
Sounds good. I appreciate you sharing that. And I love everything that you try, that, you can just see you're a constant lifelong learner, and not only do you learn that, you apply it, I mean, information that's not applied is just noise. I mean, it really is. So it's you lead by example in that. I'm sure the people at Jumpstart Studio can see that for sure every day when they encounter you. But just thanks again for taking the time just to chat with us today. It's been a pleasure to have you on the Marketing Umbrella podcast, and just have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to another great episode of the Marketing Umbrella podcast, where we provide the information you need from successful leading marketers to build and grow your digital marketing agency. To learn more, go to umbrellaus.com.